Digestion is coordinated by neural reflexes and gastrointestinal hormones that regulate secretion, motility, gastric emptying, and the movement of contents through the GI tract. There have been three phases of digestion that have generally been identified. These are overlapping phases. The main purpose of the three phases are as follows. The cephalic phase prepares the stomach before food arrives. The gastric phase increases gastric secretion and mixing. The intestinal phase regulates gastric emptying and coordinates intestinal digestion. The triggers and principal control for the phases of digestion are as follows. Triggers of the cephalic phase of digestion include sight, smell, and even the thought of food. Taste as well as swallowing will also initiate this phase. This phase is mediated by parasympathetic nerves, with the most important nerve being the vagus. We'll refer to that as vagal pathways. The triggers for the gastric phase of digestion include food, particularly peptides and amino acids in the stomach, as well as distension of the stomach. The principal control for the gastric phase include enteric reflexes. Enteric reflexes are when a signal from one portion of the GI tract influences the activity of another portion of the GI tract. Gastrin also plays an important role in controlling the gastric phase, as well as vagal reflexes. Vagal reflexes involve this reflex pathway. A stimulus from the gut stimulates a vagal afferent, which takes that information to the brainstem, which in turn sends out a vagal efferent to an enteric neuron, which are neurons within the wall of the intestine, and then they elicit a response in the GI tract. The triggers of the intestinal phase of digestion are chyme entering into the duodenum. The principal control here are enterogastric reflexes and intestinal hormones. The neural reflexes can be further categorized. We have cephalic vagal reflexes. These include sensory and cognitive food cues, meaning smell, taste, or thinking of food, can initiate gastric secretion. Short enteric reflexes involve the local distension of a portion of the GI tract or nutrients within the GI tract that activate neural circuits in the gut wall, bringing about some type of response. Those neural circuits are part of the enteric nervous system. Finally, we have long autonomic reflexes. These classically are vagal and enterogastric pathways. These coordinate activity between the gut and the central nervous system. Examples of long autonomic reflexes include the gastroileal reflex. This occurs when stimuli within the stomach send information through afferent neurons to the brainstem, send signals stimulating motility in the ileum. The purpose of the gastroileal reflex is to move contents out of the small intestine in light of the fact that we have new food entering the GI tract that needs to be processed. Another long reflex is the gastrocolic reflex. This again is initiated by changes within the stomach that send information to the brainstem through an vagal afferent. We then have our vagal efferents that go to various portions of the colon, causing an increase in contractility. The purpose of this is to move the contents along the colon toward the rectum, again to free up room for the newly ingested nutrients. To tie these concepts together, with regards to the neural and hormonal coordination of digestion, we have initially food cues, which initiate the cephalic phase of digestion and activate vagal nerves. When food enters the stomach, we have gastric distension, as well as nutrients initiating responses within the GI tract. This occurs through enteric and vagal reflexes. We then have GI hormone release, and we'll talk about the specific hormones next, but these are going to coordinate secretion, motility, emptying, and downstream transit within the GI tract. Let's look at the specific gastrointestinal hormones. These hormones are secreted by cells called enteroendocrine cells. So all of these substances we're talking about are hormones, which means they are secreted into the blood vessels and then will be taken to their targets where they have their actions. That's to be contrasted with exocrine function that we've already talked about, where substances are secreted directly into the lumen of the GI tract. The hormones we will be discussing include gastrin, secretin, cholecystokinin, or CCK for short, glucose-dependent insulinotropic peptide, or GIP, and glucagon-like peptide 1, or GLP-1. Let's first look at gastrin. Gastrin is secreted by the G cells that are located in the stomach. The release of gastrin is stimulated by peptides and amino acids in the stomach, increased stomach luminal pH during a meal. So this is interesting because we usually think of the stomach as having a low pH, which indeed it does. But some of the nutrients we ingest, specifically proteins, can function to at least partially neutralize the acid within the stomach. That causes the stomach pH to increase slightly. That is a strong stimulus for the G cells to release gastrin. Parasympathetic stimulation will increase gastrin activity. Distension of the stomach. This causes local effects that will result in the G cells secreting gastrin. The actions of gastrin include increasing hydrochloric acid from the parietal cells. This is achieved by gastrin working on the ECL cells, or the enterochromaffin-like cells, which in turn release histamine. Histamine then goes and acts on the parietal cells, causing them to release hydrochloric acid. Gastrin increases gastric motility, and it also has a trophic effect on gastric mucosa. This is particularly interesting when we consider that the stomach is a fairly hostile environment. It's very acidic, and although there are protective mechanisms to try and limit damage from this, because of the hostile environment, the lining of the stomach turns over quite rapidly. The trophic effects of gastrin on the gastric mucosa serve to make sure that the gastric mucosa stays in a healthy state. Our next hormone is secretin. Secretin is secreted by S cells located primarily in the duodenum. The release of secretin is stimulated by acid within the duodenum, and its actions include increasing secretion of bicarbonate-rich fluid from the pancreas. This in turn will help to neutralize the acidic contents of the chyme. Secretin also will decrease gastric motility. Cholecystokinin, or CCK, is secreted by I cells located in the duodenum and jejunum. The release of cholecystokinin is stimulated by fat or protein in the duodenum. The actions of CCK include increased secretion of an enzyme-rich fluid from the pancreas. It also causes contraction of the gallbladder. CCK, like secretin, decreases gastric motility. CCK is able to promote satiety, or a feeling of fullness. Next, we have glucose-dependent insulinotropic peptide, or GIP. GIP is secreted by the K cells located in the duodenum and jejunum. Its release is stimulated by ingestion of nutrients, particularly glucose and fat. Its actions result in increases in glucose-dependent insulin secretion. Next, we have glucagon-like peptide 1, or GLP-1. GLP-1 is secreted by the L cells located in the distal ileum and colon. Its release is stimulated by carbohydrates and fats. Now, interestingly, because it is released from the distal ileum and colon, there are additional neural and hormonal signals that allow GLP-1 levels to begin rising before the nutrients reach the distal portion of the intestine. The actions of glucagon-like peptide also result in increases in glucose-dependent secretion of insulin. GLP-1 also inhibits or decreases glucagon secretion, as well as slows gastric emptying. One of the most significant effects of GLP-1 that's particularly of interest currently is the fact that GLP-1 crosses the blood-brain barrier and creates a sense of satiety or fullness. The effect of increasing insulin secretion due to nutrient ingestion is called the Incretin effect. This is an interesting phenomenon in that giving a patient glucose orally produces a greater insulin response than the same glucose exposure delivered intravenously. The reason for this is because of the actions of both GIP and GLP-1. GLP-1 and GIP signaling has become an important target in the treatment of obesity and type 2 diabetes. The medications now that are being incorporated in the treatment of these diseases are GLP-1 and GIP agonists.